We're coming toward the end of our time. You knew I'd eventually get to this point where probably you and I have greatest disagreement, and that's around the abortion question.
And I want your advice on this, too.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I have some pretty heavy stuff today. I have an article of Bishop Barron at the end that'll literally just give you shivers. Now, the main theme of this video is abortion, and we're going to go through many different, or reproductive rights. We're going to go through many different clips here, starting with Donald Trump, and then we'll get into a clip of Bishop Barron talking to Catholic liberal Congressman Ro Khanna. But as we begin this video, I want you to be asking yourself this question. What impacts American society and politics more than anything else right now? Political pragmatism on both sides, or theological and philosophical truth?
You've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before. He said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
Should people be allowed to vote for the killing of babies? Just be thinking about that. So Donald Trump is on a diatribe here, which can make his position sound appealing. But pay attention to what he is actually saying. He once had a staunch view of reproductive rights, a very, very hyper-conservative view, and he's actually liberalizing his view. He's finding a via media. He claims that 85% of conservatives hold his view, like Ronald Reagan, but his view is in immediate conflict with a religious worldview. People need to face the facts. The conservative party in the United States has a growing populace of irreligious supporters. They're not religious, and I think many people, when they think about the conservative party, what they're thinking about is a connection to certain religious principles. That's no longer the case. Why are there more irreligious supporters in the conservative party now? Money.
And the judge said, your own scripture tells you to render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar's. And she replied, the bodies of our unborn children do not belong to Caesar.
So in this clip, Bishop Barron is talking to Catholic and liberal Congressman Ro Khanna about abortion. Khanna has a quite liberal and pro-abortion view in all the ways that you can imagine. And Bishop Barron really does humbly confront the congressman on this point. You'll notice he's a little bit uneasy that Bishop Barron wants to talk about this subject. Barron calls the issue of abortion the preeminent issue that the Catholic bishops would like to see solved. So it's really important to see that this is probably the biggest and most important issue when it comes to ethics and understanding how to live into the reality of the Christian faith in our modern world. Check this out.
We're coming toward the end of our time. You knew I'd eventually get to this point where probably you and I have greatest disagreement, and that's around the abortion question.
And I want your advice on this too.
Yeah.
And the advice, because we have difference. You know, I am, just because so your viewers know, candidly, I mean, I've been 100% supportive of reproductive rights, and we'll talk about it in more detail. But how can we have a conversation in this country where we disagree on issues on abortion, or if there are issues of gay marriage or other things? How do we find, if there is any possibility of a way to talk to each other?
Well, I see two things. First of all, the appeal to natural law that we talked about earlier. There's some kind of fundamental moral consensus around these ethical questions. I think if we can stand together in those, that would be at least a starting point. The other one, to be frank with you, to my mind, the Democratic position on that has become so extreme that it's precluding real conversation. It's become such an extreme position. Let me tell you, put it in a little context. I'm from Chicago. I'm a Catholic, right? My dad, Irish Catholic from Chicago. That meant ipso facto Democrat. If you're a Chicago Catholic, you're a Democrat. In fact, my father was involved in Democratic politics. His family was very involved in Chicago politics. When I went to the seminary, so back in the early 80s, 95% of us, so these, serious Catholic young people, 95% of us would have said we're Democrats, right? When I started teaching at the seminary 20-some years later, 95% would have said we're Republicans. It's one reason for that, I would say, above all, and it was Roe v. Wade, it was abortion. As I've watched it over the years, I'm old enough to remember, as a little kid, Ted Kennedy was pro-life, Jesse Jackson was pro-life. And they were pro-life, it seems to me, on very democratic grounds. They mean, hey, we're the party of the little guy, we're the party that defends, the poor and those that have no voice. And so I watched that, and then I watched by a steady process abortion being accepted almost as an absolute. I remember vividly Mario Cuomo in 1984, right, at Notre Dame. I was in my mid-20s then. And the anguished Mario Cuomo, I'm a Catholic, and so of course I'm against abortion, but yet with, reluctance, but accepting the exigency of it politically, I will support it, but I'm a tortured soul, right? And I'm privately against it, but publicly for it. And of course that was picked up by Democrats, Catholic Democrats, for the next two generations. But what I find intriguing is the declension from anguished Mario to exultant, Andrew. So when Andrew Cuomo in New York, when they passed a law that makes abortion, universally available up to the moment of birth, they're lighting up buildings in New York and jumping with celebration. For a lot of Catholics, it was like, come on. I might give a certain benefit of the doubt to anguished Mario, but exultant Andrew, it seemed like it had gone to such an extreme position that it's all on one side, and that it's precluding the possibility for real conversation. I've said to friends of mine in Washington involved in politics, give us a little bit. I said, how about we limit, third trimester abortions? Oh no, that could never happen. How about partial birth? Why don't we limit that? Oh no, it would never pass. How about born alive? Oh no, we couldn't do that. And I'm like, well then, what the heck? I mean, how can we even have a conversation if the position has become so extreme? Anyway, end of speech on that. But that would be, from my perspective, as someone born and raised a Democrat, but who experienced extraordinary difficulty precisely over this issue.
And you think this is one of the big issues that Catholic Democrats just sociologically left the Democratic? Party.
Yep. Oh, I do. I mean, look at who was the last pro-life Democrat? Dan Lipinski, whom I knew in Chicago, hounded out of office.
What about, I mean, I know you may push back on this, but the framework at least in my state in California is that you can have an abortion up till viability, and then after that, it's an exception for the health of the mother in that circumstance, which is very, very rare. I mean, it's not a common thing that people are doing. And now my view is that decision should be for the woman and her doctor in getting that health care. But I think the challenge is that we also start to talk about these exceedingly rare cases that then become the conversation, where that's not the majority of abortions, or by any stretch, probably less than 1 or 2% that are taking place.
Well, let's say even if that were the case, that it's still a lot of babies being murdered from our perspective. Right. And how is that ever acceptable within a decent society? So that's, and now that the thing has moved to the state level after the Dobbs decision, okay, good. I'll take any restriction I can get. I mean, so if Democrats are willing to say, look, we'll restrict it here or there, great. And the church, I think, would embrace that and say, good, at least we're moving in the right direction. But I think we have to have a conversation about life and about the human being. And, to me, it's become almost an ideological position that prior to birth, for some reason, what we're talking about is not a human being. And I think that's an incoherent position. I remember Hillary Clinton, it must have been 2016, and was asked about that. The baby about to be born has no constitutional rights. And she said, yes, that's the law of our country. And I remember thinking, okay, then something has deeply gone wrong with the laws of our country. So I would say I'm speaking for a lot of Catholics there who would, by instinct, like an awful lot of things within, the more liberal or democratic framework. But we balk at this, And
it's hard if there is just fundamental difference, though not judging someone's view. You think it is hard to build consensus on other areas. I mean, this is such
it's hard. You can, and indeed, I think our conversation might represent that even, that we can find a lot of points of contact. But it's a big issue,
Yes, no, of course.
The bishops have called it the preeminent issue for two reasons. One is it's a direct attack on life, and secondly, the sheer numbers involved, of roughly 1 million abortions a year. And we just think that's a staggering outrage morally. So for that reason, the bishops have said it's the preeminent issue, not the only one. And we take very seriously all these things we've talked about. And I think with Democrats, we can find a lot of common ground. As I say, most of us, like when I was young, most of us were Democrats. And this has been, a very tough pill to swallow,
So in the opening of the video, I said that there was an article that I read from Bishop Barron that literally just brought shivers down my spine when I reflected upon it. You see the issue, and so this is going to go deeper into Bishop Barron's thoughts. So if you want even more information, this is absolutely crucial to how Bishop Barron reflects upon abortion and its catastrophic consequences. So the issue of abortion is not just propositional, it's also very, very tangible. And I want you to be imagining what an abortion would actually be like if you were present. So this is what the article says. We stand at a pivotal point in the great moral debate over abortion in our country, not because new arguments have emerged, but rather because laws so breathtaking in their barbarism have been passed. And a film so visceral in its presentation of the reality of abortion has found a wide audience. As John Henry Newman reminded us, assent to a proposition is rarely a matter of acquiescing to rational demonstration alone. Instead, it often has to do with the accumulation of argument, image, impression, experience, and witness. The legal protocols now in effect in New York, Delaware, and a number of other states. So you might remember Donald Trump was talking about just the horrific and horrendous nature of post-birth abortions. That's what was really going on in New York and Delaware and other states, allowing for the butchering of a child in the womb at any point in his or her 9-month gestation. And indeed, on the clinic or hospital table, should the child be some miracle, by some miracle survive the abortion. And this has sickened the country. And they have allowed people to see in unmistakably clear terms the full implications of a twisted pro-choice ideology. So he's going to go on, but he wants to reflect upon this new movie called Unplanned. And Abby Johnson, who was a director at a Planned Parenthood clinic, she eventually became an opponent of abortion. And the reason she did is because she saw what an abortion actually is like. The film opens up with the event that proved decisive for Abby Johnson herself. As director and administrator of a Planned Parenthood clinic, she was certainly aware of what was happening on the premises, but she had rarely been involved in an actual abortion. One afternoon, she was summoned to the operating room and asked to hold the device that allowed the doctor to see the ultrasound image of the child in the womb. As the physician went about his work, Abby could clearly see the child resting comfortably and then reacting violently as the suctioning device was inserted into the womb. To her horror, she then saw a tiny arm sucked off, only to reappear moments later in a bloody soup and a catheter next to her. As she watched, unable to take her eyes off the horrific display, she saw the severely wounded baby continuing to evade the device until a leg disappeared, then an arm, and finally the baby's head. And again, the remains of the living child surged like slush into the catheter. With that, she ran from the room, vomited in the bathroom, and resolved to disassociate herself forever from Planned Parenthood. The film makes clear that she had heard arguments against abortion all of her life from her parents, and her husband were ardently and vocally pro-life. But she made the decision after she saw what it meant to end the life of an unborn child. So she needed the experience. Her hope, obviously, is that her film will have a similar effect on many others. Now, she then goes into the experience of having a baby and how those the doctors, the physicians that were actually doing the abortions, just the insidious nature of how they would show up to her own bridal shower, or not bridal shower, but her baby shower. Abby, it turns out, was pregnant, and her colleagues, all female, gathered to her baby shower. Out came the balloons, the thoughtful presents, the encouraging hugs, all meant to show their joy at the birth of a new baby. But then we realized that these medical professionals, these good friends of Abby, have spent their entire day killing babies of other women. Indeed, the blood of those procedures is on their shoes and scrubs. How is this scene possible? The condition for its possibility is the lunatic ideology of choice referenced above. If the baby is desired, let's have a party. If the baby is unwanted, kill him and cast his remains into the dumpster. Pro-choice advocates must know that this is the implication of their philosophy. Now he wants to tether this to another just absurd idea and ideology that has ran rampant, at least in the history of the United States, which is slavery. In 1850, lots of good and thoughtful people defended the institution of slavery. Now only insane people would. In 2019 and beyond, lots of decent and thoughtful people defend the pro-choice position. One can only hope that these recent laws and this viscerally disturbing film will hasten the day when only insane people would. So think about that as we conclude. I think the greatest argument against abortion is not just reason, and it's not just biblical, although there are those. The greatest argument against abortion is to imagine in your brain what it would actually be like to watch a little baby be literally disintegrated and destroyed, to become a slushy soup in a catheter. This is the preeminent issue. And as Bishop Barron said in this conversation with Catholic liberal Congressman Ro Khanna, there is something about the natural law. This natural law is really crucial here. It's common sense to see that this is insane. It's common sense to see that this is an important issue. Now I take you back to the original question. What is ultimately influencing society? Is it political pragmatism for the seeking of power and money? Or is it philosophical and theological truths based upon experience? Take that with you today. All right, this is the Daily Dose of Christ. Remember that Christianity is Christ, and without Christ, there is no Christianity. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.